We're live.
Well, you don't sound alive. Are you
God.
exhausted? Are you exhausted?
I'm exhausted. And I want to thank, ladies and gentlemen, thanks for joining us today. We got Mr. Clark Kent filling in for Shane Tassoul. It's always great to have the great, legendary Kal-El joining us.
Oh, my gosh.
Oh, man.
So
what's up, man? Yes, I'm exhausted. You know why?
Because
no, you wouldn't.
You're tired of talking to me.
Oh, man.
What's with you? Warm weather states just can't handle the cold, man. You got a sniffle. I was just talking to Mr. Munding out in Arizona. He's got a sniffle. I mean, you guys need to toughen up your immune systems.
It's allergies.
Oh, is that what it is? Everything's blossoming.
Just the attitudes around here, baby.
Oh, very good, very good.
Hey, so join us, everybody. Forget about the world for the next 45 minutes or so and join in on our sense of humor. Trained again this morning.
Good, man.
But I'll be honest with you. The kicking training takes more of a beating on my body than the jiu-jitsu training. It's just crazy.
I know. Well, I mean, I don't want to say this out loud, but I'm going to. But, dude, kicking's a young man's game, man.
Well, I didn't realize I had hamstrings in my calves because I pulled them, I think.
Oh, man. That's awesome.
Mr. Schwartz.
Hey, Mr. Schwartz.
Guys, the topic today is, where is the martial arts industry and why don't they tune in to the Metzger Tassoul Show?
That's right. That's right. Maybe we should change it to the Metz Clark Kent Show. People might be confused.
The glasses may be pulling down the ratings, Taz.
Could be. That's all right. I don't mind. At least I can see the ratings.
Hey, let's do the shameless thing. If you can hear us, give us a thumbs up in the chat box.
That's right. We need some engagement because this is no fun talking to an empty screen.
Guys, the topic is how long should it take to get a black belt? I see. Hey, Miss Marianne. It feels like yesterday, doesn't it? It's like I want to say I miss you and everything, and I do, but it seems like yesterday. But it's funny you're eavesdropping on this show because Miss Marianne Lane, everybody, I taught her children back in the day when one was like 3 years old, another one was 5 or 6 years old, and they have families. And, you know, she can answer, how long did it take them to get a black belt in my school back in the day? Had to be 5, 6 years maybe for them, maybe longer. I don't know. I don't remember. But
that's when you did regular testings when they were ready, and they were never ready.
That's right. So guys, so the topic here is, and this is an important topic. This isn't just banter, right? This is an important topic. How long? Hold on.
Oh my gosh.
Oh God.
Wow.
How long? Do you have hamstrings in your calves?
Oh my gosh. You are so funny.
Well, you know, popped so hard in my calf that it bruised from the inside out.
Well, here's the thing with Metzger, everybody. As you know, he's got to be the best. So, you know, when you go, hey, I'm going to start doing some kicks again, he doesn't start off just slow. He's got to go back to like when he was 20 and be like doing all the stuff he was doing back when he was 20 and thinks it's not going to hurt.
Well, we had Brian filming today. So we're hoping to have a little highlight reel. Just, guys, I'll be honest with you, just to prove credibility out there that we are martial artists and anybody can do anything one time. That was my one time.
Oh man.
No, you know, I've been training kicking now. Every Tuesday, Thursday, we get down there for about an hour and we're just trying to get the kicks back. And jujitsu's Monday, Wednesday, Friday. And it's important about training. But look, I put it up here. So everybody take a look at this. How long does it take your average student basically to get a black belt? So have times changed? And does that mean quality has changed? Because when I was instructing back in the day, so Miss Marianne Lane here was a parent of two kids. I trained her kids for years. They even Chris, her one son, worked for me, and Casey went on to become a great police officer. But back then, look, it took them 10 years to get a black belt with me. 10 years. And by the way, some of you would applaud that and say that's the way it should be. That's old school. And some of you would say that's ridiculous, you know? How did you retain your students? Well, the truth is, and this is the truth you have to face, is I thought I retained my students because students like Chris and Casey, I have a whole handful of students that stayed with me. And we're some of the best in the world, by the way, guys. Some of the best students in the world at what we do. If you've ever heard of Sammy Vasquez, you know, he's a multiple world champion. He's toured with Chris Brown as a backup tricker. He's been on the Grammys. He's, you know, all that stuff. So he was a student since he was like 3 years old. He was my student. Mark Canadazzato was a student for years and years and years at our school. And he went on to be, you know, Team Paul Mitchell. And, you know, the point is the ones that stayed were world class, right? And so you don't remember all the kids that came and went necessarily. So is that a good thing or a bad thing? Well, here's the argument, and here's what I want to hear from all of you. If it takes 10 years to get a black belt in your school, number one, I think that's too long, right? Even though that's the way I trained and that's the way I was, you know, that tough on my students, but I think I was wrong. However, if it does take you that long, I do believe you need to have more stops on the way to that destination. Because if you really want to make a bigger impact on your community, you don't want to end up with just your 20 black belts that you still have are the best in the world. You want to end up with 500 black belts and 20 of them are the best in the world, is my thought, because you make a greater impact because it's not all about winning competitions and trophies, right? So that's my thought to start this off. Tass, what are your thoughts on, you know, why is it good to take a long time to get black belt? Why is it bad to take a long time to get a black belt? Does it interfere with the quality? Does it interfere with the business?
So you want me to go back to, dude, I've been doing math like crazy for the last 2 weeks with numbers. I mean, I guess the answer, you know, I'll go back to it depends, you know, and here's why I say it depends. You know, years ago, we said, you know, we wanted to extend our black belts to make sure it was like a 4.5 to 5 year process because we wanted to produce really, really good black belts, right? And then I think there's this other side of me that says, you know, well, and we've all done this. We've all been roped into this idea of we are a black belt school, which I think that mantra probably needs to change. I think it's time for change. And I don't know what that mantra is. Maybe it's, you know, and we can say we're black belt and beyond, but when you say that as the goal, my belief is that a lot of people get to that goal, and when they've achieved it, they quit, right? There's a good percentage, and unless you know your numbers, which I won't go into, but that's why I say it depends, because if you could keep students for 5 years, if you look at your retention, you know what? We can actually keep them because we can keep dangling the carrot in front of them to get that black belt, and it could take them 4 or 5 years as opposed to them getting a black belt and making this up in 2.5 to 3. Well, what happens after they get that black belt? Are they done? Well, in that case, I'd want to keep the black belt testing around 4.5 to 5 years so I can retain the student that much longer. The other argument that I have is If they quit, there's a reason for them to come back, which is you got your advanced red or you got your blue and you never made it to black, right? So that's the other part of it. So I think, you know, you got to look at your black belt retention numbers and find out, are you keeping your black belts once you get them there? Number one. And number two, if you're not keeping them, like you said, you know, would you have done a 10-year black belt test, Metz, if you would have had, I'm making this up for fun, 40 different belts? Because there was a stepping process for them.
Would it have still taken that long? Is that what you're asking?
No. You're saying it shouldn't have taken that long, potentially because there wasn't enough checks or stops or steps in the way and rewards. But if you could create a reward system that was 40 rewards, 50 rewards, whatever that is, right? Whether that's belts, patches, whatever. And I'm getting, this is a hypothetical conversation. Then would you increase it? Again, I think it goes back to numbers. Would you look at making your black belt testing longer?
Yes, 100%. I mean, that is the deal. Like if you have a certain type of curriculum or requirement that you feel to be proficient takes whatever. When it took these kids almost 10 years to get a black belt with me, right? When I was training, and at the end of the day, I did retain students pretty well. I really did. What I didn't do was enroll. I didn't enroll a lot of people, but not by choice either, because I just didn't know what I was doing, right? But check this out. As you're bringing that up about the stops, check this out. Imagine it taking that long to get a black belt. And back then, when I was teaching, I had 9 belts: white, yellow, orange, green, blue, purple, red, brown, black. Think about the time in between those belts. Well, as an average.
Listen, assume somebody never tests for a belt. Like, time is the great equalizer, right? So you look at that and you say, okay, well, is it really, is getting a black belt mean that they're that good? Or is it simply because they stuck around and they could be a green belt with you for 10 years and be as good as most black belts because they've just trained longer? And the latter of the two, we had this conversation about you know, UFC fighters, right? We talked about McGregor the other day. Like, when you take time off in a craft or in an art or whatever it is, and I'm not necessarily saying he took time off, but not competing is taking time off. When you do that and you're not training, and I think, I'm going to give credit, I think John Graydon said this years ago, like, do you have 10 years or 20 years experience in martial arts or whatever the number is? Or is it the same year repeated for 20 years? Like, what is it that you're doing? Are you actually growing each year?
But hey, pause on that. That's a great question on the business side, right?
Right.
Just on the business side of things, if you've been in business for 20 years, it doesn't mean you've gained a lot of experience if you're doing the same thing year after year after year after year. And by the way, just as another side note, here's a tough question for all of you. And this is where you got to be honest with yourself. Speaking of black belt, because whatever your answer is on black belt, how long it should take the average student, it's because of your perception of what a black belt should be and how long they should be trained or whatever. But let me ask you a question. Are you teaching more memorization or application? And I'll be honest, I was telling somebody this yesterday or the day before. They had reached out to me and asked me a question about curriculum and all that stuff. And how did we do our curriculum when Silverman and I brought our schools together? Since he had a karate background and I had a taekwondo background, you know, what did we do? I said, well, the first thing we did is we realized we both were teaching too much memorization, not enough application. So we scrapped both curriculums and we created our own curriculum with the help of John Hackelman for some MMA striking and Ricardo Laborio for the ground stuff and Mike Chat on some of the form stuff. I mean, we reached out to some of our best friends and people that are the best in their field. But my point is, think about it. How often are you cramming your students for a test the week of the test and you're drilling their forms or their one steps or their self-defense techniques and you're telling them to step with the other hand? No, you spin the other way. Spin the other way. Are you teaching application and concept or are you teaching memorization? Because if you're teaching curriculum and memorization, how do you know it's your curriculum that makes a great martial artist and not mine?
Right.
And not someone else's? Does the curriculum really make the martial artist? Well, we know the answer to that is no.
Right.
Or there'd only be one art that everybody would be trying to do, right? Depending on how you define what a great martial artist is. These are things that you got to think about, right?
Well, when I was a kid, Metz, we'll go back. When I tested for my black belt, you're saying cramming for the forms. So I was a student in an organization that had nine schools, and the black belt test was always done at the headquarters school, right? So similar to like your World Trade Center, right? So this was all done in Green Bay, 30 miles north of me, and I remember it was a school that was set up where they literally had two different floors. They had a 3,000 square foot floor and another 1,500 square foot floor on the other side. Guess what all of us were doing prior to our test? We were all on the 1,500 square foot side of the room, cramming forms, going through the means of the forms. And back in the day, because I'm a Taekwondo guy, dude, I did all the Chang Han forms, all the Taegooks, and all the Palgis. So every belt, I had three separate forms. So it was all about cramming, all about the memorization stuff. And I said earlier, I think, is that what made me? Now, if you asked me to go back and do some of those forms today, I'd have to go look in the book and find out what they are, because I didn't keep up on them, because that's not what makes a great martial artist, right? To your point, it's about the movement, and it's about understanding the movement and application and drills and training. So,
hey, real quick, here's a question. Shane Weaver, I've struggled with the concept of presenting a child with a black belt. Or maybe you're struggling on what you feel a black belt is. If you define what you believe a black belt should be or is, then it wouldn't be a struggle on whether or not a child should be able to get a black belt or an adult should get a black belt. You first got to define what do you consider a black belt? Is it somebody that can handle themselves on the street? Well, if you say yes, well, against someone their size, someone smaller, someone larger, right? I mean, it's like if it's somebody that just has integrity, discipline, perseverance, respect, well, sure, a child can get a black belt. If it's about defending yourself against somebody your size, your weight, your age, then I say, sure, a child should be able to get a black belt. If you say it's knowing all of the curriculum and doing it well, sure, a child can get a black belt. So the question more is, and I'm playing devil's advocate, ask yourself the other way, why shouldn't a child be able to get a black belt? Why shouldn't they? And I know a lot of you do junior black belts and you can't get your black belt till you're 18 but I've known 15-year-olds that can beat the crap out of some adult black belts.
There's what you're explaining right now. By the way,
real quick, before we get the haters on there, I'm not saying that's what makes a great black belt. I'm just saying, what are the reasons why a child cannot get a black belt? Write those down and then look at it and then decide. But go ahead, Tass.
Well, I was going to say there's a bell curve there, right? Like, is 7 years too young for a black belt? Is 8 years? Is it 6 years? Is it 10? Is it 12? What's the number? But then on the other side of it, I would ask you the question, well, what's too old to get a black belt? Because the 40-year-old isn't kicking like the 17-year-old kid's kicking. They're not doing the average 40-year-old versus the average 19-year-old kid. There's just a difference in level, which, by the way, was part of the reason the different adult divisions were created back in the past, right? With the execs, the super execs, all the different levels, because these younger kids would come to these divisions and they'd be doing flips and spins and everything else. And these 20, 30-year-old men were like, well, I can't do any of that stuff. And these kids were killing them in the competitions. So there is definitely a bell curve. And the other thing I would throw out there is, I've always said it's really a balance for black belt testing. It's a balance of black belt's a metaphor for like black belt excellence and personal growth, being your best, right? But as the instructor for that particular student, you have to look and find out, and this is where I think teaching can be challenging and where you have to have your head in the game. Because if you've got a child who comes in and their level of ability is here, but over the course of their journey to black belt, they've grown, well, that's part of being a black belt. Or you take the kid that's got the raw talent and comes in and he doesn't grow at all. He just learns the curriculum because he was always capable of doing those things. does that person deserve a black belt? I mean, these are great like questions to ask yourself. And so we had a child, his name was Danny. I'll never forget. He was in classes, and Danny started with us when he was about 6. And he really never outgrew that mental capacity, right? So when he was 13, this was a kid, we were doing traditional forms back in the day, just, the Chang Han forms, not all 3 sets, but just the Chang Han forms. And he had made his way through the ranks, and he was moving up because I could see the kid's personal growth, how much it was helping his self-confidence. And so if parents compared Danny's blue belt to their kid's blue belt, they're going to be like, well, how come he's the same belt as my child? Because as an instructor, I know what your child's capable of, and I also know what he's capable of. And so it's a goal system, it's a reward system, but I'll never forget on Black Belt Testing Day, man. The kid got through his traditional forms, and because the parents started to know this kid because he was around so many years, and they saw him struggle and persevere and struggle and persevere, all he did was complete his the memorized forms. When he did that, there was not a dry eye in the place. They were all crying because they witnessed this kid growing throughout the course of the years, which that black belt for him could have way more meaning than someone who is a natural athlete, comes in and just goes to the ranks and earns their black belt. So it's just, it's a great question, and there's so many angles to it.
Or could it be because the audience was weak and sensitive?
Yes, right, and they weren't Cobra Kai.
There you go. All right. So listen, somebody asked, hey, how would you test someone for black belt without the memorization? So guys, if you just are joining us, since the last commercial break and you're just jumping on now, we were talking about how long does your average student how long does your average student take to get a black belt? And then I said, a tough question you got to ask yourself is, are you really, really focusing on more application or memorization? How many times have you seen, now look, even in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, I see it, right? And I love Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, right? And so I see people memorizing now the curriculums that are out there where they're flowing through the different transitions into the submissions with the sweeps, and they're doing it. But then when it comes time to really apply, they have a hard time, which all of us have a hard time, right? It always seems like the best technique in the world. Then when you try to apply it, it's very difficult. However, it's that difficult part that I think we would want to see that would make you a better artist in that realm, right? But here's the question I have. Have you ever seen old footage of Mike Tyson hitting a heavy bag, right? And if you haven't, go YouTube old footage of Mike Tyson hitting a heavy bag or hand or mitts, right? There's not anything you're going to see him throw that nobody in your school, none of your students or you don't know, right? Jabs, crosses, uppercuts, hooks, body shots. But it's his application. It's the angles, it's the speed, it's the power, it's the endurance. That's the stuff, because how many times, if you're a karate martial artist or a taekwondo, and this was us, this was you, Tass, we were just talking about it. So this is not a knock, but you see kids doing forms where they're like this.
Just fighting to get through it. Yeah.
Right. Like they're just going through the pattern. And then you're like, good job, good job, good job. It's not a good job. I mean, and don't knock me now for not encouraging kids, right? Everything I say, I'm afraid this country seems to have gotten weak on us a little bit. So you guys are the best. You understand what I'm saying. My point is, that's our fault as instructors if we're focused more on the memorization of curriculum than the application of technique. Well, go ahead, Tass.
I'll interject, Metz, for a second, and you may be going there, but I'll give an example. Like when I was coming up, I was like, all right, we had basic one, Chun Ji, Dan-gun, Dosan, all those forms. So we had to know, okay, here's Chun Ji, right? Well, what's the meaning of Chun Ji? We have to stay up to attention. Chun means heaven, Ji means earth, sir. We had to go through all the meanings of everything. Dan-gun was the bear and the whole thing and whatever, right? So at the end of the day, when we look at that stuff, did that really make me a great martial artist? And by the way, where did those forms come from? I guarantee you, I know for fact, that those forms came from a bunch of guys hanging out in a room and coming up with different katas or forms or pumse, hyung, tall, whatever you want to call it. They came up with them. And is there reasons why? Of course, if we look at the books, but there are some, and I'm going to really offend people, but there are some really stupid reasons why they do those things. I mean, if you literally look at some of the martial art books, you go, that's really this. I can't do it here. The double palm heel pressing block is really a defense against a front kick and a punch at the same time, which is illustrated in one of the most famous martial art books out there. Sorry, I don't buy it. It's not going to work. You're going to break your wrist, number one, and there are two different ranges. So now I'm getting passionate. But here's the thing. What in basic one form, why do we need to teach 20 movements to teach 2 techniques? 3, a front stance, a low block, and a punch. And now we've got to do 20 different moves. And then guess what? We go to Chun Ji, we're introduced to side block. But we got to do 19 more moves to learn 1 technique. Like, what if we just focused on those techniques that are in those forms and drill them and train them as opposed to memorizing? Because everybody knows this, right? Have you ever learned a new form, for those of you that compete, or maybe it's even a new BJJ move? But I remember doing this at a tournament. I had just got my next belt, whatever, my second, third degree, whatever it was at the time. And I just learned that new form. And I went to a tournament to go compete with it. I had no business competing with that form, but I felt like I needed to because I was at that level and I couldn't do one of my old forms. So guess what all my time was spent doing? Damn, what's next? What move is next? What move is next? All my headspace was focused on the memorization and what move was next, not on my head turns, not on my yells, not on my balance, not on all the extra bells and whistles that go along with that. And I think, if everyone is being honest, there may be exceptions. If you have a memorization-based test, in a lot of cases, you're going to see people that will, let me say it this way, that will not perform nearly as well as if you broke down some of that stuff and watched them just drill it and really get great at the drills.
Very well said, Tass.
I remember the days, man. And we did it. Dude, how many of you teach class? And you're like, but sir, we can't do 40-minute classes or 45-minute classes. Or sir, we can't have only 1,000 square foot mat. We need 5,000 square feet. Yeah, because you're still doing H or I patterns or whatever you want to call them. And we haven't evolved in this teaching concept of how can I teach this better and more efficient and save myself money because I don't need to have or to use the same space and have more students. There's all kinds of stuff.
It comes down to this. What is the end goal? What is a black belt to you? Now, how can you get there in the most efficient manner? Period. End of story. There is a culture. There is a tradition. So I respect curriculum. But a lot of us, not all of us, but a lot of us focus more on memorizing that curriculum than we do the application of that curriculum. And let me just answer a couple of things here, and I'll make a point here. So, Rob, how are you, sir? We're still conducting no contact classes with masks, 6 feet of social distancing. This is important, everybody. How, they're black belt to be eligible for black belt. Wait, where am I? Well, he just says the black belt test for them requires like sparring and hand to hand and contact, and they haven't done it. Listen, if you've been training your students and they come to your black belt test on Saturday, do we really think something magical happens on that Saturday at that test that makes them better on that Monday? So when we're in a pandemic, this is my advice, and they can't do that stuff, you modify the test. You don't hold them back from getting that belt that they've worked for and deserve just because they can't show you everything they've been showing you for the last 5 years or 4 years. It's just like, we got to modify. So you're going to be kicking a target, or you're going to be doing, endurance training. You're going to be doing punches. You're going to be doing kicks in the air or on Wave Masters, and you're going to be dying, right? Because you can't spar. So you modify, because that's not going to make or break anybody. And by the way, go kick a Wave Master for an hour nonstop, or, and punches. You're going to be dead tired. That's a test that you'll remember forever too. So just keep that in mind, right? It's not, you don't walk into a test at this level and walk out at this level. on a physicality level? Is there experience? Did you of course, right? And there's a mental shift, but it's a mental shift, not a physical shift, right? It's a great debate, but society often dictate. Where am I at?
Things for us.
Okay.
To be eligible for a black belt test, the IBJJF requires that a student be at least 19 years old and to have spent a minimum of a year as a brown belt.
Yeah, and that's okay. That's tradition. That's culture. Ask them why. Why? It's silly almost, right? Is it silly? Because what if there's a 15-year-old brown belt that's, and by the way, I say 15 because I know of one. And by the way, I can't think of his name. He's from Brazil, but he literally got up, left his home, is traveling the world, and his main focus is to be a multiple IBJJF world champion. His parents are behind him. He was here in Orlando. He can tap out most black belts. And I believe this is a year and a half, but when he came, 2 years maybe, he was a purple belt, and he can tap out most black belts because of certain requirements and rules. But it's tradition, it's culture, and we got to respect that. But we got to be honest with ourselves. What other reason would there be? What am I waiting for? What happens on his birthday where all of a sudden I can give him another belt or do this? Like, what happens in that day? Like, is it the day before his birthday? Well, we would say, well, you're the same person. A week before? Well, you're pretty much the same. A month before? Like, what happens, right? So
that's a great perspective, man. I mean, it really is when you think about it. And by the way, a lot of traditions, guys, listen, we can respect tradition, right? But we have, if we want to leave our mark, we also have to have innovation, and we've got to leave our mark as well. And just because we were given something here, right, doesn't mean that's the way it always should be necessarily. What are we doing to leave it better than we found it?
That's right. And here I switched to doing all basic fighting combinations, self-defense moves for beginners, intermediate. I don't teach the required katas. And that's fine. Again, because it's all about what is a black belt to you, or how do you want to keep, listen, you're not once a martial artist, always a martial artist. If you're a 10-year-old kid and you did martial arts till you were 12, and now you're 50 and you haven't done it since you were 12, are you a martial artist? Your objective should be to keep people in martial arts for life. And what is the best way to do that? You got to ask yourself the question. And it's not so then this person, I think this was a response to Mr. Munding, really, our kids love them. I think they mean love the katas or the forms.
Yeah.
Especially now that we cannot contact spar or grapple, do you work weapons forms? Well, if you're going to teach forms, right, there's a way to teach them, to make them dynamic, to make them exciting, to make them entertaining. But here's the deal. You can't say your kids love them, and Mr. Munding can't say our kids don't, or this, that, and the other. Unless you've kept impeccable stats, then the numbers will tell you if your kids love them or not. The kids that are still training with you love them. But what about all the kids that quit? Did they love them? And that's the thing we all have to look at, all of us.
Right.
We believe, a lot of us believe that we're doing great. Our students love us. They love our curriculum. They love our program. The ones that are still there do, but they're not the best judge of character. Why did all these others leave? How do I make it great for the ones that are still here, but make it great for the ones that left? Because they felt something else would be more fun for them, or something else has more value to them. That's the audience you got to go after. That's how you have to think on this. Exactly. We are doing black belt testing this weekend and modified everything because we can't do self-defense and multiple attacks. There you go. Oh, here's the most important one. Can we just keep that on the screen, Tass? Do we just want to keep that up there?
When you said great point, Tass, that's what he was agreeing with. So sure.
I got it.
Just leave it.
Okay. Gotcha. Sir, it's good to see you. It takes a lifetime to learn martial arts. It's a lifestyle. Black belt needs to ignite the fire of desire for lifelong learning. Don't disagree with that. It's just how long does it take to get there?
And Mr. John, I'm glad he's on because he was asking questions about, he's in California, right? And I think things are starting to loosen up, but not loose enough yet. But can you get a student from white to black virtually, right? And we've had this conversations before. You sure you can, but you have to, going back to what you said, Metz, redefine. Maybe you need to redefine what does black belt mean to you virtually versus what does black belt mean to you in person potentially. If you redefine what those requirements are in your mind, right? But yeah, we certainly can get people to whatever belt level we want to do, but you just have to do the Stephen Covey thing and begin with the end in mind, and then reverse engineer it to get them through that. Whether that's through Zoom, private lessons, in-person classes, on FaceTime, with Skype, it doesn't matter, right? You pick the outlet how you want to deliver it. But it's just like, remember Phoenix? I think it was Phoenix University or Phoenix something. Dude, they were doing online classes before online classes were even a thing. Like 20 years ago, they've been doing virtual school essentially, right? And they graduate people. So there's definitely a way to do all this, But I love the comments coming. Everyone's keeps staying respectful, which is great.
Yeah, very respectful, which is kind of disappointing because we love argument. No, I'm kidding. Stay respectful. But look, pay attention, everybody. Why so much focus on testing? It's just regurgitating a bunch of learned material, I believe. Classes is where you are made. You are correct, but it's not necessarily testing. It's about rewarding and keeping people engaged, because no matter who you are, unless you're a diehard martial artist, most people won't stay training in your classes if there weren't rewards along the way to show themselves that I'm progressing in some way, shape, or form. And that's just human nature. That's everybody. How long do you want to work at your job knowing you're just never going to be verbalized with a promotion? You just keep working. Right?
Here's a social experiment. Go post a picture or video on Facebook and get no likes on it every single day. How long do you think you'll keep posting pictures and videos on Facebook? The reward is the like, the love, the heart, the comment. And it's
the world we live in. So I'm not disagreeing with you, right? We know that.
Right.
But if you want to make a bigger impact on your market, on your community, on the world, we need to have benchmarks to show our students they are progressing, they are making headway. Even if they could see it themselves, it's about recognizing and rewarding. That's what testing is. By the way, you want to get in tradition, you said it earlier, like when martial arts started, who was testing who? It was just, right, the belt's white, the deal, you work hard, it eventually turns black. You saw someone with a tattered belt that was black, you're like, damn, they've been putting training in, they look like they've been doing this forever, as opposed to the person with the shiny new uniform and belt. You could tell they're probably just starting, right? So we put in these benchmarks just to keep people engaged, which is so important. It's so important. We make jokes about it, right? If you're listening to this, you're probably a diehard martial artist. And we do it because we love martial arts. And we joke about this, but I got a blue belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu back in 1999. I got my purple belt 2 years ago. And by the way, and this is honest, by the way, there's not many people that would still be training in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu if they went 20 years, between belts. Not many people would still be staying with it. But I've had people along the way say, you need to be a purple. And I said, I don't want a purple belt until everybody is in agreement. Like the gentleman I had, Tarsus, one of great teacher from Brazil, you got to agree with that. And Jason Patino with American Top Team, you got to agree with that. And Mike Lee from the Jungle, you got to all be in agreement. And, I wanted everybody in agreement. Laborio I work with, I want him. I always said, look, don't give me anything unless you can take me to Brazil and be proud that I'm one of your purple belts. I don't want gimmies. And then they gave me a speech about, well, it's different. You're 45. And I said, I don't give a shit if I'm 45. If I'm 25 or 45, I don't want the belt unless I can compete with other purple. That's the mentality, right?
Right.
And that's important to understand because if you're listening to this, you're probably more like that because you've made a career in the martial arts. You love martial arts. We don't need the rewards. However, when we were students, maybe most of us did. We needed those benchmarks, even though I kept telling my teacher at brown belt, nope, I'm not ready. And I would skip black belt test. And I kept skipping until he forced me. And it took me 8.5 years. It took me 8.5 years before I tested for my black belt because I had such a high thought of what a black belt should be. I'd still be a brown belt today if he didn't force me to test.
That's not true. That's not true. Tell him the real story. The real story is he was on a black belt program and it was already paid for. And when he got his black belt, he had to start paying again. So he just wanted to avoid paying for 8 years.
That's what it was. And they were trying to push me. Test, man, test. But that's business talk. That's our topic next week. How to quickly get your students to black belt so they can start paying you again. No, my point is you got to think of the mindset of the masses and your students that do not understand all the true values that martial arts will bring them. If you think about your life, by the way, everybody on here, think about how your life would be different today if you never started martial arts. Not only what would you be doing as a career, how many relationships would you not have today if you didn't get into martial arts, right? How many people would not be employed or working with you or people that you've changed their life that wouldn't have happened if you didn't stay with martial arts? We understand all the values and benefits of martial arts. But when that person comes in off the street because they were a member at a health club forever and they want to try something different to get in shape, or that parent brings the kid in because he saw Cobra Kai and he's been bugging me to do martial arts, so I want to sign him up. How do you paint this picture and keep them long enough,
right,
so they can start seeing how martial arts really changes their life? And you got to dangle carrots. And sometimes those carrots are those pretty rainbow colored belts that you have up, because we just got to keep them engaged long enough so we can keep them as a lifelong martial artist, because we know how much positive impact it'll make on their life, but they don't. And so that's why there's so much focus on testing, by the way. That's the answer to that question.
Yeah, I think painting that picture, Metz, and I remember doing this years ago, and and this is a little bit fuzzy, so the presentation may not be exact, but a couple things that I said. Someone said we keep 50% of our black belts, right? Which that means you're losing 50%. And by the way, it's no different for us. The same thing, and we've had times where we keep 80%, during a testing, and so we do whatever we can, obviously, to paint that picture. And two quick stories. One thing that I do that I don't know Metzger can pull off, but because I'm not in Orlando, this is a pretty easy deal. At the black belt testing graduation day, I always talk about the fact that earning your black belt is a lot like going to Disney World, and of course some people will give me the McDojo thing and whatever, but I say, look, here's the deal. Your parents tell you you're going to be going to Disney. You get excited, you start getting packed, you get ready, you get your airline tickets, you go to the airport, you get on the plane, you fly, you get there, you get your luggage, you get the rental car, you drive to your condo or wherever your place you're staying, you unpack, you're so excited for the next day, you wake up early, you take the car, you drive to Disney, and you get to the gates and your parents go, well, kids, here's Disney, now let's go home. And that's the difference between experiencing Disney World or seeing Disney World, right? There's a difference between earning a black belt and being a black belt, or experiencing what it's like to be a black belt. So that's one of the things that we talk about is, give it some time, be a black belt, experience a black. Don't just get a black belt, but train and be a black belt in whatever you're doing. The other one that we used to use, and I was just reminded of as we were going through this, would be like, let me ask you a question, parents. If I gave you all your tuition back for the last 4 years, but you would have to trade it, every relationship your child has made, just everything Metzger said before, right? Everything, all the benefits they've gotten, the confidence, discipline. If I gave you back, whatever, $10,000, I'm making that number up, right? Would you take it? And they're like, no. I said, okay. But what if I said, Now remember, and I reiterate, you got to give back all the relationships, all this, all that. What would you take $100,000? And I think everybody on here would agree you wouldn't take $1 million for that. You would not trade $1 million for the experiences and what martial arts and the impact, the friendships, the relationships, everything that's had on you, if you really went back and looked at the timeline. And so if it's worth $1 million to you that you won't take for it, if you can paint that picture into your school from day one for a student on their journey, you're going to enroll more students, and you're going to create a culture in your school that just begs for retention. I mean, they're going to want to stay because they're part of that culture. So I wrote that down because we haven't talked about that black belt promise. I think we call it 10,000 or 100,000, $1 million promise, whatever. We haven't talked about their black belt test in years, and it's something I think we need to bring back to really illustrate to them the benefits and the importance of training and why they.
Mr. Peter Johnson was sending you a message.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah.
Where on here?
Yeah. It just says punk with exclamation point.
Oh, yeah.
No, I don't know what that was, but thank you, Peter. I don't know what that is. Probably something because he was putting it's like kick punch club with black belt metrics. Hey,
one other thing real quick. You talk about what does the end look like? What does black belt mean to you? Well, I guarantee you a 6 Sigma black belt is different than what your black belt is in your martial arts school. So they have their idea of what black belt is in a company, organization, lean manufacturing terms, right? And we have our idea of what we think black belt is. So at the end of the day, nobody's wrong, but you just need to look at your numbers and you need to understand. And that's why they have a 6 Sigma black belt, because it's all about lean manufacturing. There's metrics and measures that they use to figure those things out to know if you're qualified to do all those things, right? So I thought that was a great analogy and parallel to, we can use black belt as a metaphor in anything that we want to, but we have to define what that means. I mean, hey, you got younger kids. Did they ever do the recorder in school?
Yes.
Did they have belt systems for the recorder as well? Do you remember?
I don't know. Kylie has something. Only Kylie's done it so far.
So I think the kids now have like a belt system for the recorder as well. So
it was fine until I threw it against the wall and smashed it. By the way, I like Mr. Johnson here. He said I said they were all being too nice. So he.
Oh, there you go.
That's our kind of humor, sir.
Yeah, that's right. He doesn't have a.
Hey, you said something, Cass, about painting that picture, that $1 million picture, and you're going to enroll more students. And we always talk about the Maya model. The Maya model is you got to recruit students, you got to learn how to generate revenue through value, but you got to retain students. And by the way, belt testing is your biggest retention tool. Rewards are your biggest retention tool. I just happen to say testing is one of them. How many people tell you the day they get their next belt, I quit?
Yeah.
The day they get their next belt, how many quit? They're usually on a high when they get their belt. It's a huge retention tool. The problem is if they come too few and far between and inconsistent, we think we're doing a better job and we're not. We're not doing a better job because, again, I don't care if you say it takes 20 years to get a black belt. Just have 25 stops in between, just have a consistent ladder that a student feels that they're making progress and they're continuing. And then somebody mentioned something up here about teenagers. How do you
motivate?
How do you train teenagers or something?
Any suggestion on how to keep teenagers interested in martial arts? That's where we struggle keeping students. Well, first of all, congratulations on knowing that that's where you're struggling, right? And then the next part is you'd have to look and see. I mean, there's things that you can do, obviously, but do you have I don't know your class schedule. Are your teenagers in with your 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12-year-old kids? Are they in with the adults? In some cases, it does warrant having a teenage-only class or even putting them in a teen/adult program. But you got to be mindful of that too, because that can be a little bit that can help hurt adult retention if you have the wrong teens in that class as well. So I'd have to know more about your school.
Right, and it is culture. It is culture. So like our Curry Ford location always has done very, very well with the teen market. And one of the things that we did was like every other month, we'd have a teen night. where they would meet, they'd all grab pizza, like the instructors and staff, the teens, they'd go to a movie, they would, the parents would be there if they wanted to be there or drop them off. And it was just different for the teens. You can modify the way you present your curriculum. We also got into more of the cool looking martial arts stuff. We would practice more with the teens, but like you said, Tass, it's different. If you have them mixed in with little kids, it's tough. If you have them mixed in with adults, it's tough. And by the way, when do you get teens? Well, mostly, right? Kids start younger. So by the time they get to black belt, they're teens, right? They're in their teens, a lot of them. And then how do you retain them then? And one of the tips that I would give you is if you were testing students every 3 months, whether it was a stripe or another belt, or every 4 months, whatever it was, once they get black belt, keep that testing cycle up every 4 months or every 3 months. They're still testing because you don't want this culture where they get black and then it just stops. Their progression, their reward system just stops. So for us, it takes 2 years to go from first degree to second degree black belt. It takes 2 years. So if we test every 3 months, there's going to be 8 stops in between where maybe it's a black belt and in 3 months they get a black belt with a white stripe. 3 months later, as they're learning, a black belt with a yellow stripe through the middle. 3 months later, a black belt with an orange stripe. It's just progression. So they feel different. If they've been a black belt for a year and a half, they feel different than the kid or the student who just tested Saturday and got their black belt. They feel a sense of pride. They feel like there's a recognition there that they've been a black belt longer. It's still just again, progressing and having a reward system to keep them engaged.
Metz, I want to chime in on that, right? So we switched to this about 2 years ago, exactly what you're talking about. Black with a white stripe, black with a yellow stripe, black with an orange stripe. And listen, I want to be very candid. I can't stand the way it looks. I hate it. I hate the belt system. Now, I had a choice. I could do chevrons. I could do patches. I can do whatever I want. But so then if I don't like it, then why do I do it? Because it's not about me. It's about the reward system. And we've seen an increase in retention with our black belts because before they would get their embroidered black belt, which they still get, by the way, as their show belt, right? But these other, we call them work belts, the black with the white, black with the, those are their work belts they wear to normal classes. But guess what's happening? From first degree to second degree, they were used to testing every 3 months. And then all of a sudden they get their first degree. It's 2 years before they ever go through another test and see another reward. That's it. And so when we started implementing this belt system, we saw a huge difference in retention. And also what's actually cool about it, right? Now when I look back at it and look on the floor as an instructor, and by the way, a lot of you are going to say, well, you should know this anyways. But as an instructor, when you look on the floor, there is different levels of first degree black belt. The black with a white stripe just got their black belt. I can identify easily, clearly, or assistants can easily and clearly know that that black belt just got their black belt, as opposed to a black with a brown stripe, like they're testing for second soon. You have this immediate visual on the floor of where those black belts are in that 2-year spectrum, as an example. So whatever system you want to use, that's a great tip, but whatever system you want to use, whether it's patches, chevrons, stickers, stars, we've tried a bunch of stuff, and now we use belts, and I think it's fantastic.
So I think at the end of the day, how long does it take a student to reach a black belt? It's an irrelevant question. It's just make sure you have rewards along the way, but you need to work backwards. What does a black belt mean to you?
Right.
What does a black belt mean? Like, what do you need to be or have or do to be a black belt? And then work backwards, right? And then that'll answer your question as far as, can a child be a black belt? Can a 90-year-old be a black belt? What does it mean to you, right? So, guys, if you didn't sign up for Maya Foundations yet, go to mayafoundations.com, mayahub.com.
That's the assumptive close right there, everybody.
Right. Just get on that so we can see you guys next week, Tuesday. At what time? Or is it Wednesday?
Wait, you started the pitch, not me.
Wednesday, the 3rd at 2 p.m. Eastern time.
Listen, you guys want the 4 things to level up your business. you should jump on. I mean, for real. It's already the end of January. So, if we had these New Year's resolutions, goals, whatever, and we waited, and then it's going to be the end of February, and then it's going to be the end of March, and another year is going to go by, and we didn't take any action for a business. So we're here to help you guys. We'd love to help you guys, and we're helping a lot of people right now. Literally got a text message yesterday. It was actually when we were on our consultant call yesterday from a client. He said, best January ever, and he actually has investors in his school. He said he will pay. He's going to pay. He goes, we keep this up. He said, well, he was more explicit. He was excited. But he said, we keep this up, we'll pay our investors back in the next 4 months, which will be 2.5 years early from what we were supposed to do. So killing it.
Guys, in all seriousness, we just talked about this yesterday. We see a lot of people. By the way, Lake Nona just came in, Dana Fisher. They're at 17 new enrollments right now for January. And you know how many mass intros they did this month?
No, none.
0. They have one this weekend. They have one next weekend. So 17 new students right now for the month. No mass intros. But my point is the social media, right? But by the way, social media, white belt in a bag. They got a new student referral. She said it was from everywhere.
Yep.
But here's the point, everybody. And this is what I told everybody, in CMA and Elite. If you see an influx of leads coming in on social media, this is not a time to rejoice and say, wow, I spend $500 a month and I've been doing that for a year. But wow, right now we're just getting more leads than ever. Then double it. Pay $1,000 to your ad spend. It's an investment, not an expense. And I'm just going to be honest, so is joining foundations or anything else. And foundations, by the way, is only a 2-month program. It's 4 Zoom calls, 2 months. But you got to start looking, industry. Start looking. By the way, if you don't want to join foundations or Maya, that's a mistake, but I'm kidding. But my point is you got to look at things that are an investment that's going to finally get you back on your feet again after COVID if you need it, or to the next level if you want to get there. But at the end of the day, if you're paying for ad spend on social media and you're seeing an uptick in leads coming in, put more money to it. Take advantage of that wave right now. Okay. And yeah, here's just got 5 new enrollments in the last week, mix of social media, referrals, and walk-bys. Things are picking up, everybody. Things are picking up. And Mr. Schwartz, you already can get in there, I believe. Yes. So you don't need foundations. You've already learned all that stuff. But you can absolutely get a refresher.
And it's crushing it, by the way.
Yeah, doing great. Hey, guys, thanks so much for joining us again. Next week, there's a different topic.
There is.
But Shelby has the next four weeks of topics or something. So we hope to see you here next week. If you guys have questions, reach out to us. We'd love to talk to you, sell you. You know what I mean? Try to get some money out of you. Do whatever we can, as the perception is. I know Tass is hungry right now to make some extra coin. Yeah, I just thought we never took that sales approach. What if we try that sales approach?
Yeah, just call it out, right? We're gonna call us so we can close you. Oh man. We're gonna get. If it's your first time watching, I apologize.
Hey guys, it's a great day. It's beautiful weather. Hope you guys are doing good. Hope your city or your county or your state is opening up and you can all get back to some kind of business. But stay safe and think about your black belt journey for your students. So we'll see everybody soon.
All right, team. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Metz. We'll see you.
All right, Tass. See you guys.